do Ted Cruz or whatever. But if you fight back with their propaganda as a framework, you are actually reinforcing it. Because you are accepting their terms. And again, one of the things that I always say to people is we need to write our own story and to walk beyond those terms and to really celebrate what you care about and the stories that you care about in our country. And one of the pieces of that I think is important that I always sort of forget to tell people is that we have a shared language in this country. And our great heroes, the people that we tend to look back on as people we want to emulate. I always pick on Fannie Lou Hamer because I think she's the coolest. But Lincoln, Abraham Lincoln, George Washington, I'm going to say Thomas Jefferson, even though many of you know how I feel about it. Sitting Bull, Red Cloud, I mean, I could just go on, and Jane Addams. I'll stop, but the people who are in our pantheon of heroes, all of them believed in equality before the law and the idea that people had a right to have a say in their government. Maybe not Lincoln so much with women and not Thomas Jefferson. Oh, we can leave him out. But the point is that those people who are arguing for getting rid of voting, for getting rid of equal rights, for getting rid of equality before the law, all of those things, they ain't got nobody on their team but the Confederates and the neo-Nazis. So why don't we tell those stories? Not the Confederates and the neo-Nazis, but rather the stories of our great heroes who protected the values that people like us here are trying to protect. Because those are stories that tap into a civic identity that we already share. So one of the ways to combat that propaganda I'm suggesting is our own stories about a future that reclaims the best parts of our past and enables us to take that theme of equality forward.
The next audience question says, I'm wondering where the young people are. They are barely here tonight. What are your thoughts about that and about how young people today are engaged in the preservation of democracy?
Okay, young people are where it's at, let me tell you. So there are very active young voting groups out there. They're doing phenomenal work. And there are also a number of really good people spreading the news, but also the idea of voting. But they're on social media channels that I don't frequent all that much. You know, TikTok, for example, or Instagram, which I'm working on learning. But you know, I'm not a native, and it takes a while to get going on it. But if you're wondering about young people, first of all, one of the things that really jumps out is how many young women registered to vote after the Dobbs decision. Very powerful to me lately has been watching the crowds that are turning out for Vice President Kamala Harris to our colleges. And it's really interesting because it's not getting a lot of coverage in the mainstream. And if you watch the films of these people standing waiting for her for like hours of time, they're waiting for a rock concert. And what just kills me about it is that I'm actually a huge fan of Vice President Kamala Harris, but let's be honest, she's a vice president. Like, can you even name like more than 3 vice presidents? And they're acting like it is the best thing since sliced bread. And I'm thinking, did anybody ever turn out for Dan Quayle like that? And I think one of the things that she symbolizes is a generational shift in that it's really interesting to me to watch President Joe Biden, who's obviously a much older white man, handing the torch to a much younger woman of color and watching the different audiences that respond to those two groups. And so the young people are there, they're just not here because it's a Friday night and because they are not consuming the same kind of media I think that those of us in this room are. But they're definitely there.
This next question was upvoted, and I know you and I were talking about it backstage, but this question says, how do you see the House speakership playing out?
So, do you really want to know? Because that's what I wrote about in tonight's letter. So let me start by saying we do not know. And I was saying backstage, usually I know what's going on, simply because there are patterns. You know, if you do stuff enough, you kind of know what's going to happen next. It could be this or it could be that. You know, we ain't got no idea. That being said, there are some really interesting implications going on here of this moment. Because right now, the only two people in the race, are Steve Scalise, who compared himself to a KKK leader, and Jim Jordan. Well, but it's interesting. So aside from what's of interest to the country, and I'm thinking about this politically, what would be of interest to the country is for the Congress to be able to do its job. But it's interesting because one of the things that we're looking forward to, of course, is 2024, and of course, Trump is the current frontrunner for the Republican nomination by a lot. Right now it really looks like he's going to get that nomination. But there's so many pieces in play. Of course, there's all the legal stuff in play, but most of us have not really seen Donald Trump since 2016. That is, he's been pretty tightly managed. If he has to go back on the campaign trail, if you have been watching him, you know he looks terrible. He cannot put a sentence together. He's full of non-sequiturs, and I don't think that's going to play very well, and anybody who's been watching him knows that, right? So that's out there. He's out there, but he's also, not looking so great. So that, coming back to the House speakership, Representative Jim Jordan from Ohio is very, very close to Trump. And putting him in the speaker's chair is essentially giving it to Trump. So that has a number of implications. And one of them is that if you are a Republican who would like to be reelected, do you really want to go in front of the country with Donald Trump and his right-hand man being the symbol of your party in such a way that they're probably not going to be able to get anything through Congress until if Jordan were in that chair, unless he promised to make Donald Trump's legal trouble go away? That is not a winning message. And there are at least 18 Republicans who won seats that Joe Biden won in 2020. So the piece by Hakeem Jeffries today in the Washington Post saying we're willing to do a power sharing arrangement. People are like, there's no way they do that. And if history is right, no, there's no way they do that. But if you're doing a political calculation as a Republican who also recognizes that a number of the maps that gave the Republicans the House of Representatives in 2022 have been declared unconstitutional and are being changed. Which way do you jump? Do you say, I'm going to give that vote to Jeffries? Do you say, I'm going to go for an extra long lunch, so maybe fewer people? Or do you maybe say, Kevin McCarthy wasn't so bad, maybe we can convince him to come back? Well, you laugh, but he's threatening to resign. Is it a threat? Is it you think you didn't want me, you just try Steve Scalise? So I think we don't really know, but I think the political fight, I think I called it the political currents under the surface, are not just, we're going to do it all our own way. Because there is this problem with the fact that putting either somebody who compared himself to a KKK leader or somebody who is basically going to act like Donald Trump in that chair is going to be murder in the 2024 elections. It's just going to be murder. So if you're the Republicans, what do you do? And that's what we're all waiting to find out.
Well, we'll wrap up with two final questions. One is, do you feel our democracy is strong enough to survive another Trump presidency?
No. No, it's not, which is why I'm out on the road. Because they're not, one of the things that just kills me is everyone goes, well, he doesn't mean it. I'm like, he literally called for the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the man who is the most powerful military leader in the world. He didn't call for him to be executed. Let me be very specific about what I say. He said that what he had done amounted to what he did by calling his counterpart in China with the approval of the defense secretary and a number of other defense officials to say we weren't in fact going to attack him amounted to treason because he did it without Donald Trump's permission because he was being wacko. And that's the scientific term. And then he said, and that in the past was punishable by death. He didn't come out and say, I want to kill him. But that was extraordinary. That was extraordinary. That's what knocked John Kelly out of his hole and made him come forward and say, I don't want to be there. Yeah. So he has said that Project 2025 says they're going to completely get rid of the nonpartisan civil service. And the reason that matters is because that civil service is the ballast for the ship. You know, if you've got a government where every time that the lead changes, then everybody has to be loyal to the person at the top, and it all becomes very factional. It's all like, he's my guy, no, he's my guy. If you have just sort of a middle group of people who are just doing their jobs, and they don't really care who's president, they might personally care, but it doesn't make any difference to whether or not the envelopes go out the next day. They're ballast for the ship. You get rid of all that, you have gotten rid of democracy. So, but they're not being shy about what they're saying, and the attacks that the former president is making on individuals and the stuff he's doing, and the fact it's just not showing up in the newspapers, that's a real problem. Because I can't tell you how many people have said, well, he doesn't really, the whole blood thing, he talked about immigrants poisoning blood the other day, and it got a little bit of play, but somebody said, well, he wouldn't really have said that. I'm like, they are not being shy about what they're saying. And when Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the time, he has now stepped down, when he said that he expects to be arrested if Trump is back in office, that to me is just that's it. So do I think that we'll survive if he does that? Well, we will survive in the way that regimes, that people do when regimes take over and you have to go underground, and someday we will reemerge. But I don't believe we're going to go there. But the way we're going to make sure we don't go there is by working like hell for the next 14 months.
I'll wrap up with this question. At the end of your book, it very much, for me, it sort of conjured up the monologue written by one of my favorite writers, Aaron Sorkin. I think it was for the Newsroom, and I'm paraphrasing, but he has one of his characters say, you know, when has America actually been great? If, you know, what century, what decade, you know, what era? So America has never been great. The thing about America, why it's so special, is that it can be. And so I want to ask you, how can we become great?
So one of the arguments that I made in the book was that the idea that America was great at some point in the past serves authoritarians, because it says we can get back there if only we go back to those traditional laws or religious laws that made us great back then before people ruined it. And one of the things that we study, you know, my master's is in literature, that we study in literature is the speech that from the Arbella that John Winthrop gives when they come to the United States. And he's already worried that the country has fallen into this horrible trough, and they haven't even landed yet. And so America's always like, you know, there was a great past before now. So like they're not even on the soil, and he's like, it was better before. But the idea, I think, of democracy for real is the idea that it is always being shaped. It is always moving, not necessarily moving forward, But the whole point of real democracy, true democracy, is that it's never finished. It's never perfect. We're always struggling to make it better. And that if we understand that, and that for all the bad in our past and our present, we have also always had the American people leading us forward to a place that offered justice and possibility for more people. That we will never, ever have a perfect future, but we can have a better one. And that is the heart of democracy.